All right, thank you. Again, we want to thank Patty Cassidy for joining us today. Patty is a senior associate with Griffin-Hammis and provides training and technical assistance on customized and supported employment, support brokerage, and building social capital with individuals with disabilities, families, vocational providers, and school personnel. Discovery and working with families is Patty's favorite part of her job. This is where she does her best work, and that's in getting to know job seekers with disabilities, their families, and exploring interests, skills, talents, and the community together. Patty brings a wealth of experience through her work in direct service, administration, and executive positions for both publicly funded agencies and nonprofits that provide employment services and support. Patty's going to be giving us a brief overview today of customized employment and explain the importance of discovery in customized employment, as well as introduce self-directed and family-directed discovery and give us some tools and strategies for us to use as well as families. So thanks again, Patty, for joining us today, and I'll hand it over to you.
Hey, well, thank you, Jessica. I am excited to be here this evening to share with you, as Jess said, my favorite part of my job is really the practice of discovery, of getting to know individuals with disabilities in the totality of their lives, not just about employment, of course, but employment being the major focus of my work, really looking for ways and means in which I can get to know job seekers well enough that I can assist them with their job goals in their life and what they wish to do in terms of a career. So we've processed some of these tools over my many years of working in employment services for people with disabilities that we have evolved from many of our practices into more fine-tuned and better practices and tools. So I'm excited to share that a bit with you tonight. I'm trying to hit the wrong button. Here we go. So we're going to be talking about the importance of discovery, that in lieu of the ways in which we used to develop practices or develop a knowledge about job seekers, and those discovery practices have come about from the lack of outcomes that we have from those traditional practices of assessments and interest inventories and those kinds of tools. So we're going to talk about that. And then about the aspect of self-directed discovery or family-directed discovery, where individuals have more power and control over the process, and then give you some of those tools and strategies. There's been some interest in both the self-directed and the family-directed approach. I think that with all of the movement that we've had in self-determination and self-advocacy, that those principles support people to make their own personal decisions. Person-centered planning practices bring people who know, love, and care about the individual job seeker to help support them into the life planning process and employment planning process. And so the self-directed discovery is based on these approaches, and I think that it's time that we see some more practices being used by families and individuals themselves that professionals have had some control over. And it's not that individuals shouldn't have and couldn't have been doing this all along. I think it's an issue of learning and practice. So what we'll do today is we'll talk about the idea of what the challenge has been for us throughout this work in the development of customized employment, is that we really want to try to help individuals find good, lasting, person-directed employment that really meets their needs and really supports who they are beyond the confines of our traditional employment development strategies, the ones that professionals have used for a while, that may not have been as effective for individuals who have high or complex support needs. What we've learned is those traditional approaches don't work well for people that have more significant challenges, because they often result in relying on comparing a job candidate against a set job description or other job candidates. And people with significant disabilities often don't fare well in that comparative approach. I think that, they don't stand out as the most qualified. And then often in those traditional approaches, we're expecting that when we talk to employers that we are expected to bring them the most qualified applicant because that's what we have stated, and that's a good thing to do if we're using that approach. So while customized employment was designed for people with more complex support needs, I think that it's really very helpful for anybody who has some complex barriers to employment. So we're going to think about how this evolved. I'm going to give you a little history lesson here. In the early 80s, supported employment for people with significant disabilities who had been previously placed in day centers, sheltered workshops, or often were in no services or no programs, were often not served in employment in the community. And in 1986, Congress added the supported employment methodologies to the Rehab Act, and it was where the idea that people with disabilities could succeed in community placements if long-term support was provided. And what that implied was is that there were individuals who were going to need ongoing support. So the idea of what supported employment was defined to be competitive work, meaning in real jobs in our community, in integrated but I heard an interruption. Was that something I did?
I did as well, and I'm not sure. Nothing popped up here, so.
Okay, I'll just keep going in.
Thank you.
So I was going to say, well, I've done something.
Jess, I couldn't hear anything, so I think it's just the host who heard it.
Okay, good.
So go ahead.
Good. So I think that when we think about the supported employment, really defined, I think, for the first time that employment services, that the kinds of funds, resources that were available to citizens with disabilities that had been denied to people who had more significant disabilities are now coming to the forefront, that people with disabilities could work in competitive places, that it's for people with severe disabilities for whom competitive employment has not occurred. And it was a real exciting time, and we saw a lot of placements of people in community jobs because these three pillars were very important. It was real work, real pay, meaning it's not payment through an agency, it was real employers. It had to be in places where people were working alongside individuals who did not have disabilities. It was always about integration, and that there was that component of ongoing support. So we're really talking about commensurate wages. That means being paid for what the same as anybody else would be paid. And so we can have real work and real pay and ongoing support, but that could be a sheltered workshop. So we have to have that other piece, that integration piece. And there can be competitive work without long-term support. And that can work for some people, but that's typically not what works for folks with more severe disabilities. And then we could have integrated work, and it could be ongoing, but it could be volunteer work. So we must have all three pieces. So during the 1980s and 90s, we tried implementing supported employment. And we did a good job initially, and we started placing lots of people, but there's been a plateau. And what I believe initially happened was that many people who have less severe disabilities in that population were placed first. They were the more easily placed individuals, and that they were, and they're working. But when we started getting down to where other individuals that stumped us as professionals, we had less success, was because we weren't changing our strategies and approaches. So now there are still high unemployment rates among people with disabilities, and we are not meeting the kinds of outcomes that we had hoped for, and we needed to change our strategies. So customized employment is a wonderful practice that evolved about 10, 15 years ago. That means that we are looking for ways in which we can individualize the employment relationship between employees and employers that meets the needs of both. What I think is so surprising about this statement, it seems so much like everything else we've always said about employment. It's a win-win situation. We kind of use those terms sometimes that they're just words to say that both people succeed, both the job seeker and the employer. But I think this statement has a word in it that really is powerful, that talks about what customized employment truly is, and that's the word relationship. And at the very beginning in discovery, we start establishing relationships among job seekers with disabilities and community business people, business owners, people who run, operate, hire people with disabilities, or hire people, period, where we start establishing that relationship. And I think that is the difference, and it starts at the very front, at the very first steps we take, which is in discovery. The other idea about customized employment that is so important for us to know and understand when we're developing a discovery practice and we're getting to know a job seeker is we need to know what the outcomes are possible. We can't only just think about wage jobs. So although customized employment does consider and does have as an outcome wage employment, but it's typically something that's been negotiated. So if it's not negotiated, this is my little pet phrase, if we don't do some type of negotiation, then it's not customized. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing if somebody can go in and fill an employer's existing position. If the person can do it and do it well, then that's wonderful. But for the people we're talking about, generally that doesn't occur. So we use other strategies like job carving, which is taking some duties that the individual can do and carving them out of other existing positions. It could also be job creation, where we create positions, but it's also self-employment or entrepreneurial initiatives, micro-enterprises, or other kinds of job development or restructuring strategies that helps an individual find work that fits. So we're going to talk about those things just because it's important to know that as we're developing in this discovery process that we don't limit our scope of thinking about what's possible. So customized employment, in my mind, is really not so much different from supported employment. There are just two things. One is that just the tools and strategies will help us reach some better outcomes, meaning those things we just described around job carving, creation, resource ownership, and we can also start a small micro-enterprise or a business within a business. The other thing I think about is so powerful about it is that these sets of tools and strategies can really help us create employment instead of just finding employment. And I think that's what's so powerful about the relationship aspect of this. So in the past, we spent a lot of time really focusing on interest. We asked people, what do you want to do? What job is ideal for you? And we start with that because it's a critical point of getting to know somebody, because we really want people to share with us what their dreams are, what their visions are, what they think about work. But we can't just stop there. We need to know that with someone's interest that we can help that individual explore other people in the community who share that common interest. We can explore other businesses or business owners who share that interest because it helps to develop that personal engagement and that relationship. It doesn't mean we're asking for jobs, but we start to connect with people who have like-minded skill sets, like-minded interests. And it's really passionate about, finding somebody who shares your passion, and you share that passion together. It can breed a wonderful relationship, could result in employment, but at least you get knowledge about careers. So when we have a conversation and we can start that conversation with an employer, we can start to negotiate. And we're more likely to have a conversation with somebody that shares our interests. But other than that, we need to know way more than just about a person's interests. We can't stop there. But we also need to know about the person's skill sets. And we need to know about what the contribution that the person might bring to a job. And I use that word contribution, meaning what do you bring to a job that an employer will want to pay you for, that generates revenue for the company. Because we're not just looking for charity jobs for people for us to go connect people so that they have something to do. The employer needs to know that the individual can help to generate revenue, that what they bring to the job is valuable. So we want to really try to match the preferred work and conditions of the employment settings to the actual job seekers and what they know how to do now, what their skills might be now, what their ideal conditions of employment might be, and that or the skills that they can learn in the future. So it's really critical to success because we know that if we use good strategies like discovery, like systematic instruction, good workplace supports, and in the technologies that are available, that we can help make a successful job match. So the tools are a different set than what we've had in the past. So here is, again, a list of those kinds of outcomes that we've talked about earlier. So as we begin this discussion on discovery, just being aware that the skills, the tasks, the contributions, the conditions of employment, all of those things are taken into consideration with an ultimate goal of one of these outcomes, and we don't target the outcome we learn what outcome might be best as we connect with the businesses in the community. So here's kind of the process that we employ as we go through customized employment. We want to talk about discovery, and on this page you'll see the terms discovery and personal genius. And that is the process that Griffin-Hammis uses. It's very similar to everyone else's. If you have known Mike Callahan's work, or you work with Transcend, or any of the other organizations that provide similar training and technical assistance, we all use this process of discovery. And our document that you have, or we'll have a copy of, is the discovery staging record. It's a way to capture the steps of this process. Where our process differs in discovery is the identification of 3 vocational themes. We often do wonderful, good person-centered planning, good discovery. Discovery is a form of person-centered planning. But then after we've done this wonderful work, it's difficult sometimes for us to translate. Now that I know this individual, where am I going to take this information? What businesses do I go contact? So the identification of vocational themes is our version or means to translate that information into business contacts. Then what we do is we generate a list of 20, actually will be a list of 60 businesses, because we want to generate 20 separate different businesses for each of those vocational themes. We then want to conduct informational interviews, and we use this process that we call informational interviews to connect with businesses, to have a conversation, not to ask for a job. We simply want to begin the conversation of, tell me about your business, with the intention that if we decide that there is something that we can talk about, that we further the conversation, that we then have an opportunity for a negotiation or a business analysis or job analysis. Or we might be coming up with strategies for a small micro enterprise or a business within a business, but it happens at the end. We don't target a particular type of outcome. So what we're going to talk about for the remainder of today is really about that discovering personal genius aspect, and we'll touch a little bit on each of these other areas. Why I think it's so powerful is to take away, this discovery is so powerful, is to take away that traditional job search strategies that we professionals have used for so long that may work for some people, do work for some people, but have not worked well for job seekers who have more significant disabilities. Job development strategies, they've used standardized vocation evaluations, they've done interest inventories, they have done practices of preparing resumes, helping people learn to interview. Looking at job ads is what we discussed. What I said earlier was to go out and find jobs, but they don't really develop jobs. They go out and find where there's an opening, and they help people fill out applications and go on interviews. And we have not found that those strategies work well for some people who, for whom these techniques have been ineffective, for whom it might be even damaging to someone's dignity or to their reputation to go into community settings when they're not, when the environment has not been prepared for them, if they would have some difficulties with communication or with the way in which they express their fears or discomfort. So we often find that some of these traditional strategies have left some people behind. They never get chosen. They never get to go to the interview. So this more traditional strategy results in having the employer hire the most qualified, the best applicant, and the people who are not selected get sifted to the bottom of the pile. And they're often never selected for this approach because they never meet the qualifications of an existing employer's need, and they're often then deemed unemployable or their disability is too severe for employment. So the customized approaches change that, and we spend more time getting to know job seekers in a way in which they get to show us where they are at their best. We don't spend time in traditional testing evaluation in agency buildings. We spend time where people are comfortable, and we explore their skills and talents and get to know them well by spending time in community places. And we compile that information and we document that information in a way that we share among team members to make sure that we've got it right. We use that informational interview approach as opposed to job development strategies. In terms of the traditional methods of job development, we use the informational interview instead. And then we really spend a lot of time matching the skills of the job seeker to an employer's needs. We don't guess. We make sure that we're doing it well. And then the last part of that is we're going to negotiate in some way or shape or form, whether it's a formal proposal or if it's just a verbal agreement or a simple listing of this is the skills that you would hire this is the task or the jobs that you have hired someone to do. And we really want to make sure that that proposal is set up so that it completely matches the job seeker, and that customized approach usually results in better outcomes. So discovery is the linchpin of customized employment. We can't do this customized approach without getting to know the job seeker and know them well. So the discovery process is an active, robust time spent with the job seeker, going places, doing things, clarifying, getting to know the person, and get to know that individual very well. In the case of self-discovery, it's getting to know yourself or your family member in a way that's meaningful to employment. Family members know their sons, daughters, brothers, sisters way better than any professional will in a short period of time doing discovery. But often families will uncover information that they did not understand or know because they often don't spend time with their family member in community places. So discovery is about exploring and getting to know the person, but it's also about getting to know the community. So getting to know the individual job seeker is time spent uncovering and explaining and defining attributes and characteristics, skills, likes, dislikes, needs for support, strategies that work, strategies that don't work, and everything that we can collect that has some meaning towards finding work, keeping work, learning work. But we also want to spend time learning about the community in which the job seeker lives, your family member, because in the community, we need to know whether there are places where those skills, tasks, contributions are needed. So we need to explore the community at the same time and uncover relationships that could potentially result in employment. So discovery answers, who is this person, in a way in which it has meaning for the employment development for this person. It's about looking for those useful skills that the person may have in real, tangible situations. We're looking for the ideal conditions of employment. What works for this person and what will not work? What are things that are non-negotiable, that these things have to be in place? And then lastly, what are the themes that will drive job development? We'll spend a little bit of time here in a bit about those themes. What we've learned is if we take all of those pieces, the skill sets, the tasks, the contributions, the interests, and put them all together, we can create a phrase or a word that describes a work contribution, or it's actually what we call as a theme. The word we use is a theme that will help us understand the variety of jobs businesses that might exist where those themes might be important. And I'll explain more about that in a minute. Discovery, it's about helping to get to know the job seeker and helps to develop contacts within the community that help us develop a foundation for connections to businesses and opportunity. We don't get to know the job seeker and then suddenly put on our job, take really good work in getting to know the job seeker through discovery, and then we take off our good customized hat and put on a traditional job development hat, because that doesn't work. The discovery process is all about getting to know the job seeker within the context of community, businesses, and work. And that gives us a foundation for negotiation. And without that good foundation, we would not have the opportunity for those negotiations. So that's why discovery is so important, is that we really, really have to spend time in community places. And I suppose the most important part about the self-directed discovery process is that it's an effective way the most effective way I know to put control of someone's career right in their own hands. That we as professionals, and I'm one of those professionals who have struggled with being the sole responsible person to ensure that this process of discovery happens, but at the same time often have difficulty relinquishing some of that control because I feel so responsible. So I think with self-directed discovery, and I think we had this conversation just a little bit early on, I think that was with you, Amy, about, is this new? Is this a new process? Well, I think that it's always been best practices for and professionals who work in supported employment or customized employment to work very closely and to encourage and to make sure that the individual job seeker and family members are listened to, are heard, are in the process of engaging with us in a way that they have some control over the process. The self-directed discovery, I think, is even a better way of doing this, in which you take control and that you direct every aspect of that. And some job seekers do that well on their own, and others still need support, and that can be done through either professionals or their family. So here's some examples of those. Certainly the most widely known process is the professional directed discovery, where an employment staff person, usually a paid professional who is skilled in customized employment or supported employment, is the individual who's responsible for holding the cards. They're the ones who plan the activities to uncover. They're the ones that hold meetings. They're the ones that do the interviews. They're the ones that write the personal profiles about people to ask, does this sound like you? Do you agree with what the work I have done with you and on your behalf? Self-directed discovery is where a job seeker would spend time probably with someone who can coach them or materials that can assist them with getting to know themselves in a way that makes sense to employment. So it's not just say that I'm a good cook, but understanding what is it I know how to do, what are my skills in cooking, what things can I cook, and are these skills that other people may want or need in an employment setting, or do they want or need these in a community, in a business? So self-directed discovery is reflecting back to yourself about the skill sets that you have and to be realistic with real practice in community places. And then family-directed certainly is from the aspect of individuals who may not be able to self-direct, or who have a combination of both self-directed and family-directed, where an individual job seeker and their family work closely together to do those same things that I just described, is spending time figuring out what pieces about this individual's life make sense and what skills and tasks does this person have and where can we move with it. So let's move on a little bit faster here. So what some of these things are, and this is the keys to the good discovery, and so what some of these things are and the tasks that we'll be discovering are these series of steps. Interviews is always the word we use. Who knows? Initially, who knows the person well? Who spends time with them? Who knows the individual? And then later, we spend some time with people in the community who share similar interests. So the initial interviews are with if you're the family member doing this work, it's talking to one another. It's talking to people who know your family job seeker, the family member job seeker, who maybe have been previous teachers or neighbors or friends, people who spend time with the individual job seeker, and you might get some different perspectives. If you're self-directing, you might talk to people who know you and ask them their opinion of you. What do you think I do best? Tell me what you admire about me. The kinds of things where you get to know. But later, we're going to start introducing people in the community who share similar interests, and we're going to be doing those informational interviews. So we'll be doing those kinds of interviews as well. We're going to spend time, in the second step, is home and community visits. So often, individuals and their families know pretty well the job seekers' interests in their home, uncovering hobbies, things that they do well, but also going to the community places where the individual spends time, through their church, through their clubs and associations. And in some cases, we spend time introducing people to new places in the community if they don't have many in their lives. But we start to spend time identifying and observing what the individual knows how to do. And we start usually with home and community places. Then we start figuring out what kind of discovery activities might we, and I hate using that word because it smacks of preparing events, community activities. You know, I don't know what other word to use, but what we mean by that is doing things together where you can observe and see the actual skills that somebody has. So if somebody says that they love to cook, it's spending time cooking. If somebody says that they love to say that they're at a sport, they play tennis, or somebody loves to crochet, we actually spend time doing those activities with somebody and to capture what the skills are with or without support. So I've met many people who have interests and they don't have a lot of skills in those specific interest areas. A young woman I worked with told me one of her greatest interests was stuffed animals and sewing. And so we just wrote down one of her interests is sewing. And then when we came up to find out when she was making some stuffed animals that she doesn't know how to sew at all. She'd never used a sewing machine. She doesn't know how to use a needle and thread, but it was an interest. That wasn't a bad thing to learn. It was just simply that we weren't uncovering the skill sets that go along. But we did that through exploring and taking her to a sewing class at one of the local fabric stores. So discovery activities are things that are both familiar and unfamiliar, and we do those things with people to uncover their talents and skills. Remember that the focus is on identifying the skill sets that people have and the tasks that they already know how to perform or tasks and skills that they can develop. We're also looking for any of those ideal conditions of employment. And what we mean by that is that sometimes people have specific work hours that work best for them, or specific people that they work well with or don't work well with, meaning like somebody shouldn't work with women or work better with male supervision or work better outdoors than they work indoors, or whatever it might be in terms of that we can identify those things through that process of discovery. And then lastly, we're going to those foundations for those vocational themes. All of that information helps us with that development. Discovery is not about a job. And I think in the past what we have done is we'll spend some time with people and we would want to put that information into a funnel and turn a crank, and we hope that with all that information out would spit the ideal job. And as a matter of fact, that didn't work before and it doesn't work now. What we really want to know is that we've got to come up with a good description about the person, and that we don't want to jump to the job. We want a complete discovery with open-ended mind about what are all the possibilities that could exist if we develop themes for this person. So we're not going to jump to jobs. Oh, he's really good at such and such. Let's go to this business and find that job for him or her. So the key to discovery is really about getting to know the person so that we can later determine if a particular job fits. Not go find a job that might fit, but actually uncover that job when we're developing employment. So here we come into the actual contributions, skills, tasks, interests, and conditions for success. And how do we begin that process? I have a copy that's available to you, which is that Discovering Personal Genius, DPG, which is the Discovery Staging Record, the DSR. Not to confuse you, but the DSR is the record that you all have a copy of, and it's a similar form to many other types of vocational profiling. But we use that form because it's not just a place for recording information. I think of it as a repository to record everything that we're learning, and it's meant to be done electronically. It's got very small space to write because it's meant to be used on an electronic document where you can click on the document and it gives you lots and lots of space to write narrative. You can also include pictures. You can include video. You can include many aspects of watching people do their work. The discovery process is an ongoing work, but it does have an ending time. We can work on discovery forever, and I have some fears about that happening when the agencies or the professionals are in control of this. But we want it to be a process where individuals we spend time with people getting to know them quickly so that we can say we have a snapshot of who you are now. And that the goal of this discovery staging record is to make sure that if I read it or any one of you read it, or if I saw this document or saw pictures and imagery, that I would say that this described my family member, or that you and I have the same image of this individual, that we all agree that this describes the job seeker. So this initial consultation and discovery could be done with a discovery guide. I think that the self-directed discovery process can certainly be done by families and families alone who are skilled in understanding good customized employment. And I think that there are a lot of families who can do this work very well without consultation, or they can seek the consultation where they need it. But I think that for some people, the self-directed discovery process, whether you're an individual with a disability or whether you're a family member, you might need to have an initial consultation with someone to guide your process. This is something that we are developing right now is a workbook that will help individuals do a self-directed discovery process, and we will include that as a first step. It isn't necessary, but I think it's really important that somebody has an expert they can go to give them guidance. The second step is always to have a team of people. What I mean by a discovery team is that it's really bringing together at least 2 people, if not 3, 4, or 5 people that know the job seeker well and that are not necessarily paid human service providers. We're talking about family members, brothers and sisters, uncles, neighbors, previous teachers, people who know the job seeker through church, anybody who has a vested interest and cares about the job seeker, because the more minds and people we have together to come together to help the job seeker, the better the work will be done. The more minds, the better process we have. And then I think the last part of that, the last step of that is really having a step-by-step process going through that discovery staging record, which begins with the home visit. And that doesn't, if it's your home and it's your child and it's your family member, you may not have the same process involved as you would if you were a paid professional, but we're going to ask you to go through and look for things that help uncover and describe those things through the home. So we're going to go through each step: home, neighborhood, skills and tasks, community activities, development of vocational themes. So the consultation with somebody who's fully trained and experienced and confident in discovery would be someone who might work as an agency, or it could be somebody who is a parent mentor, or it could be an individual who does this as a consultant. There also could be people who might work for an agency, but you want somebody who truly understands the discovery process. You want to make sure that all of the people who are involved, the job seeker, the family, and any of the team members, will all have a clear understanding and overview of customized employment, including all of the outcomes, including that self-employment, so people have a clear view of the potential of what discovery could lead to. You also want to make sure that you have a guide or at least somebody you can connect with to help you through the process. The discovery team is another aspect we talked about, which was having those extra eyes, working on the process of having somebody make sure things are moving forward, or having other people that help give you different interpretations. But it really means that you have to have some strong allies. And I have worked with many people with disabilities who have few family members, few friends, few associations. And so those individuals who do have strong families generally can bring a lot of individuals to the table. And if not, we need to figure out how to invite more people. And that's another thing that a guide can help you with.
I'm sorry, Patty. This is Amy. Do you mind if I ask a question about that?
Sure.
One of the things that some of our provider organizations this last year who've really been trying to implement more of a customized employment strategy sort of struggle with a bit is when you have an individual or job seeker they're working with who doesn't have a lot of friends or family outside of the staff that are working with them, to bring in to kind of get involved in the discussions. Do you have any suggestions for those kinds of situations for when there's not any kind of family involvement or there appears to be kind of limited exposure to people sort of maybe outside that service system?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I think that what this process of customized employment has done is change the role of a professional. And that if someone is acting as the guide or the leader of this discovery team, and if I understand you correctly, there may not be a family member involved at this point, or the family member's there, but they're not necessarily self-directing with their family member, they're participating, or they have no family members. I think the role of those professionals is to invite somebody to be a part of this team. And how we do that is as many and varied ways as there can be, but the outcome needs to be is that your job is no longer to be the sole person, but for your job is now for you to find somebody who will now be a part of this individual's life for at least a bit while we're going through discovery. So it's about finding about an interest that the job seeker has and going around and telling everybody I'll give you an example. A young man that I work with had a great interest in NASCAR. I don't know anything at all about NASCAR, but I started asking questions. And my husband lived in Indianapolis. He knows about, race cars from Indianapolis, kind of race cars, Indy cars, but he has a great friend who likes NASCARs. And then we found somebody in the community who had a NASCAR store who sold NASCAR memorabilia. And we just start asking until you can say, I have a question for you. Would you be willing to help me? And that's just always the most disarming question, is to simply ask, will you help me? I'm working with this job seeker. Can I bring him to your store and will you talk to us about your work? And then from that, we can say, I'm having a meeting next week. I wonder if you would be willing to come. Sometimes people can't. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a team meeting, but you have an ally that you can send emails to, you can make phone calls with, you have a connection, you and the job seeker can go visit, and you have that person be invited to be a part of this person's life. You can't control how it happens, but you just do it.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. And as much as we can avoid the professionals, and as you were just describing, I've been in teams where they're, the job coach, the employment specialist, the job developer, the case manager, the group home supervisor, and the group home staff of the team. And, we have to do better. We have to go out and do what I was just describing. It's bringing other people into the lives. So the next part is just going through the step-by-step through each stage of that discovering personal genius. It's just really going through the workbook. And we will have a workbook in the process of development, hopefully by midsummer. And really what it is just saying, let's go through that. It's basically the DSR, which is what you have a copy of, but the workbook will have more examples in it that you would just follow the process. You'll be working with a discovery team, which means that team of folks that will help you think through places you might go, people they may know, kind of the social capital development that we need to have happen. And for some people and their families, they have a ton of social capital. They have great resources to bring to the table, and for others, we have to help build that. So you may check in with your guide who says, I'm at this point, this is what we've collected, does this look good, does this make sense, or, no, I think you need to go back and do more discovery activities, tell me more about that. And then sometimes we have to access consultants and other experts along the way. It may be around Social Security work incentives that we as a discovery team may not feel confident that we fully understand, so we might want to connect with the WIPA or one of the Social Security work incentives professionals in a community to make sure that we understand clearly the impact of employment on Social Security or the use of those Social Security work incentives. And then we may want to find somebody who can help with assistive technology or somebody who can help with adaptations. We can come up with lots of ways in which those kinds of experts, and it could be around employment. It could be, experts that know more about refrigeration if somebody's going to be working with flowers, or we could, any kind of expert. It doesn't have to be disability related. So this self-directed self-directed discovery process is contained in the 6 steps through that document that you have a copy of. Part of that is the personal profile, and that's really comes from the work of Michael Callahan and Mark Golden Associates. It's really a descriptive process of getting to know somebody so that when you describe the profile of the person, that the individual would agree, their family members agree. Everybody says this describes this person about his skills, talents, abilities towards employment. There must be a benefits analysis because it's very important to know as you're looking at potential outcomes if a person has $5,000 or $6,000 available to them to use and work through the past plan, whether they have access to any of the other kinds of benefits and what it might mean in terms of employment. We need to know their interests, their skills, their tasks. We use that term exploitable skills, meaning that these are the ones that an employer can use to generate revenue. So what are the kinds of skills that somebody has that's very useful that could result in any kind of skill set? Anything can be useful to an employer. So don't ignore those tiny types of skills that comprise a series of steps towards a task, with or without support. We want to write the draft profile, and then we have that vocational themes and informational interviews. So it's the same kind of process that we use with whether a professional is developing that process, but family members may have more, or the individual themselves may have more ability to direct that. So the personal profile, it's, the family or the job seeker will determine who are the important people in this individual's life, what kind of neighborhood do they live in, and what kind of work might be available in the neighborhood, what about transportation, are there connections to clubs, groups, associations, businesses, what businesses does the family use, where do they go, where do they purchase their groceries, where do they shop, what are the individual's hobbies, what kind of tools might they use, what's their home like, traditions, cultures, when is this person at their best, when are they happiest. And how we do that is by spending time observing and asking others for their perceptions. I think for family members, it's always been pretty much of a surprise when someone who their son or daughter might know outside of the family has a different perspective of their loved one. And that happens for all of us. It doesn't happen just for individuals with disabilities. I think that the more exposure we can have to other people, the more information we can gather. And it's, I think, very hard for a family member, particularly a mother or a father, to maybe to change their perspective of their child because they've known them for so long. So spending time in places that are unfamiliar is real important. Going to familiar places is good because we need to know what the person does well and what they do best when they're in familiar places, home, community, neighbors, places where they may go in the community. But spending time with a job seeker and getting different perspectives is very powerful. The benefits analysis we've already touched on, using anything that we can understand about benefits that could be used for employment. So there's something called a benefits planning query, BPQY, if the individual is an adult and they are currently receiving Social Security, you need to understand that information. And you can do that through a couple of different people. One is through, I think the name has changed again, but it used to be called the WIPA, the Work Incentives Planning and Outreach Specialist, or a CWIC. And these are people that exist in the community that can help individuals and family members gain clear understanding of their benefits and impact on employment. And also, if we're talking about younger people and students who are currently receiving Social Security, they can use these earned income exclusion and earn lots more money than most individuals and their families are aware of. So you have to, might require the direction of a discovery guide, but I think with the help of team members and with meetings for clarification, it can be real helpful for individuals to understand that. So that's an important component. This is the part that I think family members may have more insight because they spend a lot more time with their sons and daughters. But I think also for individual job seekers who are trying to describe themselves in terms of discovery documentation, that they get stumped when they say, when somebody asks about their interests, their skills, and their tasks. What do you know how to do? What can you do? What are you most skilled at? What do you like most? What do you like least? I think what it comes down to is really doing things and spending time writing it down, taking pictures, and asking others for their impressions. And I think about a gentleman that I worked with who said he was good at woodworking. And I saw pieces in his home. He had made plant stands, and he had made frames, and he had made small shelves. But I never saw him make them. And it wasn't that I disagreed or didn't think they were nice or that I didn't believe that he made them, but I needed to know how he made them and what it took to make them. And so he couldn't explain it to me, but when I watched him make a frame for a picture, it was very clear that he had great skills at picking wood, that he knew how to use jigs to support the woodwork as he was framing, as he was cutting the edges of the frames, the butting edges together. He had excellent skills at staining, at cleaning up his work site. There were a lot more things to that he didn't understand were actual skills. So part of this is spending time doing things with people or observing people. So some things that I think that individuals and families can do is spending time with their job, their son, daughter, family member, with the chores that they currently have. And I have worked with many, many people whose families don't require their sons and daughters to have a lot of chores to do. I hear often, well, it's just easier for me to do it. And boy, do I understand that. I really do. But I think that the most help that I think that we can do for our sons and daughters, starting early when they're still in elementary school and up into high school, is giving people an opportunity to really have some tasks and chores to do at home, and to be given those things to do and be done on a long process of doing this throughout their lives. They really need to have chores and tasks that change. So as you begin to help with the dishes, then you may be responsible for the dishes, and then you may be responsible for helping cook a meal, and then you're responsible to cook a meal. And really building skill sets while people are at home that might seem irrelevant in relationship to work, but at the same time are building specific skills and tasks that people can complete. Another thing that I think people can do is to have, especially when sons and daughters are still in school, is to have the sons and daughters get summer jobs or after-school jobs. And I know that for some people, the ways in which somebody can get a job might be very varied. Some people can babysit. Some people can cut someone else's grass. And other people have much more limited skills. So one thing might be is that an individual could retrieve the mail for a neighbor who's elderly and can't walk out to the mailbox and come back. So it might be something that can be coached and supported, but it can be something that individual can do. We also think about ways in which people can explore their interests. So this gentleman that I have up on the screen right now is AJ, and he was a very interesting man. He makes sounds and words, but he doesn't speak clearly. And his father says that he also doesn't understand his speech. Yet AJ can really make sure you understand him very well through pantomiming and gesturing and with sounds and facial expressions. And kept telling us that he liked cooking and he liked cleaning. But I think for some cases, I think people like cleaning because it's all they've been exposed to. He'd been in the sheltered workshop for quite some time. So AJ was given this task to go into a large community kitchen, and he was cleaning. And it wasn't just simply that he could clean. AJ could take apart a stove. He could push a stove out from the wall. I mean, he was highly, highly skilled, way more than anybody ever assumed, just because they had spent time with him in the workshop. Even his father was surprised. He said that he said, now that I know that he can do this, he's going to be doing this at home. The picture on the right is a gentleman who, AJ's in the middle with the green shirt, and the gentleman on the right with the blue shirt is a person who happened to know AJ, and AJ likes music. So he found an activity that could be done in a community place where AJ was not familiar, but we just wanted to see what he might know. So he knows of a man who manages a very large record store. This is in inner city Philadelphia. The gentleman in the back with the black cap on his head was the manager of the store, and they have all kinds of blues and reggae and all kinds of really wonderful music on 3 floors of a building. And he gave AJ a tour, and then through their discussion, he said, I've got some things you can do for me, and gave AJ the opportunity to take apart cassettes. So the kind of cassettes where it has a theft, a larger plastic piece that's theft prevention case. So what he had was music that hadn't sold. He needed to take apart the cases and then separate the CDs where he would either sell them really cheaply or give them away, and then put the theft prevention cases in another stack. And AJ was instructed by the store manager. No one else was involved, although we were all hovering around. As you can see, I took the picture. That AJ was able to produce a very quick pile of CDs and cases, and even organized and stored them really well. So we learned a lot more about his skills and abilities, and about they had to come up with a little adaptation for him to crack open the case, to get without cracking the case, but to get it open. So we have to look for ways in which it makes sense. Terry's a young woman who's there with her head down, the blonde-haired woman in the left-hand picture, who makes jewelry a lot. She lives in a group home, and she spends a lot of time just making jewelry out of plastic beads and string. And we followed her at home, and we knew she could do that well, and brought in an assistance of somebody who's a consultant to help come up with some jigs for her. She uses a wheelchair, and she has very limited mobility in her hands. And she came up with some ways for which Terry could continue to bead without dropping the beads on the floor, to give her more support for her hands, to help her manage her beading process with an actual beading tray that's used by most people who bead. It's a device that you can use and buy at a beading store. So it's very common, but a little bit more adjustment of her wheelchair and her table. We also knew that Terry liked pets and animals, and she was very passionate about helping to rescue pets. And so another activity that came up with was the purchase and the development of a line of products that were for pets, to see if that might end up with a job for her. So in discovery, we came up with more beading, which she did, and the bracelet on the right is a Dalmatian bracelet. It's for someone who might rescue Dalmatians, own Dalmatians, a black and white bracelet with a charm on it. And these are Swarovski crystals in silver fittings, and she sells them somewhere between $25 and $35 a piece. By getting a small amount of money from vocational rehabilitation, Terry was able to test out some of these, try the work to see if she could do it, to test market a few of her pieces, and then her team helped do some focus groups for her. And so that was in the process of uncovering her ability to sell some products. Jared's a young man who had gotten some classes through a day activity center on making videos. And all Jared talked about was working on videos. He wanted to become a videographer. He's a gentleman that had lots of opportunities through his team of support to videotape events at a local community college. He did some videography work for a cable TV access channel. He spent time uncovering his interest in utility poles. One of his interests was utility poles, and we weren't sure what that meant, but he had notebook after notebook full of sketches of utility poles and all the little wires and numbers. You've ever seen little metal numbers that were tacked to a utility pole? We didn't know exactly what that means, but when we'd ask him, he couldn't explain it. He just says he likes them. Through connections through the community, we uncovered the utility pole graveyard, the place where all the utility poles are, when they're taken down, they're laid into big lots, and people can come in there and purchase them. I don't think they even purchase them. I think they get to take them for free. We found a person who was a retired engineer who knew people who were engineers that when utility poles were taken down and cables were buried underground, that they were the ones that recorded the movement of those cables. So we got to talk to those people, and Jared got to go with us to talk to those people. And then lastly, he got to talk with somebody and spend the day with an energy crew on a large truck out for the day. Obviously, he couldn't do any energy work on the lines, but he spent some time talking to people who were in that line of work. So we're exploring their interests and tasks and skills by those community connections that evolve. And Ben played the trumpet at his church. He goes every day, puts on a suit, and goes to his church every day at noon for his music worship. He had worked in a grocery store for years, but lost that job when the pastor of his church moved to a new church. And it was believed that the store owner only kept him employed there because of his commitment to the pastor of the church. So trying to uncover Ben's skills beyond just his playing an instrument, the individuals went to find a man who owned the store that pretty much repairs all of the instruments in this community for the high school. And then just got to spend an afternoon, and the store owner says, "Oh, you like this? Here, come over here and try to take this apart for me and see if you can clean it." So even by just doing an informational interview and expressing some interest in conversation with somebody who shares similarly, he got an opportunity to try some things. And we got to see that he was very good at that, really did have some talent. And then lastly, I think this is my last one, Tom is a man who has a lawnmower. He loves cutting grass. He keeps his lawnmower chained to his front porch so nobody will steal it. He knows how to change the spark plugs. The picture on the right is Tom rolling up an electric cable from a weed eater. He has the skills of more skills than I've ever had in my life trying to roll up a long electrical cord. There wasn't a tangle in it. He's just highly skilled. And these all came from going out to places in the community where he could demonstrate what he knows how to do. It's not just enough for him to say, "I love cutting grass," but we uncovered a great number of skills that he had by going to community places. He also rode a riding lawnmower with the support of a staff person as he volunteered to cut grass at a local homeless shelter. So interest in tasks and skills are really important, and all tasks are comprised of skill sets. So if the task is making a salad, the skills are selecting the vegetables, unwrapping the vegetables, washing vegetables, cutting vegetables, tearing lettuce, all of the kinds of things that are small, that all of them are important, even if not all of them can be done at one time, or even if the person can't do all of them. So everybody should have those kinds of tasks to do at home. Everybody should have jobs while they can, as any of us have had, doing the kinds of things that young people do. Even as an adult, we can certainly do other tasks for friends and neighbors as we're waiting for that real job to happen. As much as we can do in community places, and families can certainly facilitate that. So finding the ideal conditions of employment is another component of this, and that's certainly looking for those things. I think we've talked a bit about this already. The kinds of support factors that are really necessary, I think, are important. I think we miss this a lot. We miss things that families already know about how to teach. How do people learn things new? How have families adapted things within the home to help individuals? So as much as families can assist collecting that information, it is powerful information to know when we're making good matches for folks. A lot of this information is going to be collected. We talk often about writing things down, collecting it, and putting it into a document form, and I've shared that discovery staging record with you. But it can also be done through visual imagery, through a portfolio, through videos. It can be done through a presentation format. Any way in which the information is collected that is meaningful to employment development. So the draft profile is recorded in some shape or form. It's shared with the discovery team, and not just at the end. I think it's something that's shared throughout the process. And it's really time maybe to review that document. Could be done with a guide. And then really plan on coming up with, do I have anything that's incomplete? And what I mean by incomplete is if you follow the document and follow the processes of going through the, do I have enough skills? Have we uncovered everything we know about this job seeker, our son or our daughter? Do we have enough information about how they learn best? And if not, we've got to go back and do more information, or do more searching. And I think that what's really, really important to know is that discovery should not occur over months and months and months. Although it can, particularly if you have a young son or daughter who's 14, 15 years old, maybe not ready for real work, this is an ideal time to start to collect real important information that can be shared at the point of graduation or in transition. But in most cases, if we're working with adults, this process of discovery is meant to be quick and timely, usually over about a 6-week period of time, no more. And it shouldn't be more than about 25 to 45 hours worth of time spent getting the information collected and spending time with the job seeker looking for ways in which we can uncover more skills and abilities. So we just want to go through quickly and with purpose, because the ultimate goal of discovery is to move into employment. And I'm going to make a pause here because I think that this is where the vocational themes part is, and I want to check on my time. And I think I'm getting close.
Yeah, we've got about 15 more minutes, Patty.
Yeah. Gosh, I didn't realize I had this much material. I think I'm talking more than I intended to. Sorry.
No, it's great.
It's really good. So I'm liking that you're talking.
Okay. Well, you can read this as easily as I can speak it, but let me just get to the vocational themes part, because I think that'll guide us fairly quickly. I think the vocational themes and informational interviews, to me, is the result of good discovery work. The vocational themes, we have a workbook. I believe I shared that workbook as well. I think that's the other document you have. And what we're trying to do is to collect this information we've been talking about and come up with some words or phrases that define areas where people who share similar interests, skills, and talents work. I'm going to give you some examples here in another page. But we want to come up with at least 3 kinds of themes. So I worked with a young woman who loved art, but she particularly liked anime, like not the dramatic Japanese-looking drama anime, but the Hello Kitty kind of anime, the cute little faces with big bright eyes. She also liked stuffed animals. And again, I think I told you the story about her a few minutes ago, that she said she loved sewing. So we thought, oh, we've got our themes. Well, we spent more time with her, and what we uncovered were her themes were more like this. It was around art and anime, because she does all kinds of art, but particularly anime. And so when you think about where is art important, art can be a museum, it can be a store, it can be a school, all kinds of places where people work who have an interest in art work. You could work with flowers, you could work anywhere. The second thing we came up with over a period of time was her interest in stuffed and sewn things. I don't know how, so you can see that they're not job descriptions, they're not job titles. So we came up with something that had to do with sewing and stuffed animals. Stuffies or plushies is what she called them. And then the third vocational theme we found was her faith. And that came after we spent time with her, realizing how much she talked about her church. We went with her to her church. We spent time watching her, doing all kinds of tasks and volunteer work with her church. And so those 3 vocational themes ended up helping her develop a wonderful self-employment career. And it's another whole long story, but those are the kinds of themes of what we're talking about. So you should try to figure out those 3 kind of themes and discuss them with your team, because there's an art to it, but there's also a need for multiple heads to come together and to kind of come up with broad enough themes that allow us to find lots of places to go visit where a career might make sense. So there's some things we can do in terms of that, because what we want to do with those emergent themes is we want to go out and do some informational interviews. And informational interviews are really about asking people, and I hesitate to use the word interview, particularly with some of the job seekers that I work with, because they think they're going on an interview. And I don't want them to confuse this. So I say we're going to go out and do some career discussions, or we're going to go out and talk to people about their work. And what we want is we want to go out and talk to people and do informational interviews where we're not asking for work, but simply saying, can you tell me a bit about your job? What is it you do here? Why did you start this line? Why did you start working here? Why did you open this business? Tell me more about where you see your business in 5 years. Is there any kind of equipment or anything that you'd like to have that you don't have now that you would like to buy? And if so, why don't you have it? Those are some things that might guide us to future resource ownership opportunities, or relationships with other businesses. So how we go about doing that is having those vocational themes discussions with your team. We prepare some interview questions for those informational interviews. And I think that for some people, the job seekers and their families can do this themselves. One of the suggestions I had from one of my colleagues was when working with youth, that over a period of a couple of years before the son or daughter might be graduating from high school, is have them do some interviews with 10 family friends about employment. So they might do 2 or 3 or 4 of them in a year or more. I guess it depends on the person. But that way they're talking to people that they're familiar with, people they know, people they're comfortable with. They know they're not going to get a job. They're simply asking, and they get the practice of learning about what other people do for a living. So it's really important that people get that opportunity to spend time with people in their place of business. You don't do the interview at the person's home or invite them to your house. The person should always go to the actual business site of the family friend. And that would be one way that can be done by family members while people are still in school, or even as adults. But the informational interview process then is even more forthcoming, where we start to identify businesses that we may not know as a family friend, but someone has given us a warm lead. So someone who is interested in stuffed animals, we found someone in our community who had designed and built a company on stuffed animals, and we did an informational interview with her. So it's always about asking for advice and information. So the next part of this is doing those informational interviews, and then we'll start to focus on job development. So here's some examples, some quick ones of somebody's got a passion for trucks. Maybe the theme could be broad enough based on skills, abilities, and interests that it could be transportation. Somebody really loves children. It could be that the person has some skills in reading and writing and likes to do teaching. That maybe education would be that broad vocational theme. And if somebody's really into tattoos, maybe it would be something called an alternative lifestyle. Each one of those 3 vocational themes guides the person and their team to broader businesses where those themes make sense. So it's not just trucks, therefore you go to a trucking company, but transportation could be in almost any kind of business. It could be airplanes, it could be buses, it could be a school district, it could be an insurance company that has a fleet of cars. It could be all kinds of ways in which we can explore those. We've already talked a little bit about the informational interviews and trying to find exact kinds of places of business, not just general places, but looking to very specific businesses that usually come with a warm lead. We need to use our connections and social capital, asking people for advice and help to get us places where it makes sense. And this is a gentleman, Mike, who is the fellow in the orange shirt. He was a man who would not leave his apartment, hadn't left his apartment for a long, long time. Uncovering an opportunity for him to go to a bike store, Mike went, and during his informational interview with a staff person that he trusted, he got a chance to take apart a bike and to get some instruction. And he's now buying a bike, and he is taking a course on maintaining bikes, with the hopes that it might lead to, at least we're learning some of his skills, and with the hopes that it could lead to some employment for him. Okay. And there's another young lady who, I don't have time to tell her story, but she ended up gaining some wonderful employment through a school district based on some unseen talents that she had that would never have been uncovered in the day center, and even her family didn't realize were skills that could be used in an employment setting. So she ended up working in a school district and brought resource ownership of books written in both Spanish and English to her job. So these informational interviews are going to help guide. This is still part of discovery. It is not job development, but it helps not only just, we've already worked with the job seeker and discovered information about the job seeker, and now we're doing these informational interviews to help us even further. So they're wonderful strategies to use that many professionals don't use these informational interview tactics. And I think that it's just very powerful to use a team to help with this. So this is the beginning steps, self-directed discovery, and it's followed by the remaining 3 pieces, which is the cultivating employment opportunities, engaging employment supports on the job site supports, and then ongoing support and career development, which are the remaining pieces of customized employment. So it's not an easier way to complete discovery, having family members do it. It's a wonderful tool and process, and it's really fabulous for younger sons and daughters, family members up to and including transition age. But it's really, really difficult, I think, for any of us to ensure that we're not just dumping this on family members. I think for some of us, it's, people see it as, well, if it takes that long, it's a very lengthy process, let's just let the family do it. I think we had a little bit of a pre-conversation around making sure that we use it effectively and that it follows a process that gets to the information that we truly need, and that the individual job seekers and their families are really good at understanding what the customized outcomes are, so that they can use those self-directed discovery processes as well. But I think that it is definitely a tool that can be used by any family member, and I hope that as we see people embracing this process and getting the supports they need to go through it, that we will get some more feedback about the outcomes and whether what kind of outcomes we actually result in these approaches. So I think we are close to done, and I didn't leave much time for questions or comments. I apologize.
That's all right. Thank you very much, Patty. Do we have any questions or comments? I know I was writing down a couple throughout, but you answered them as we went along. So,
well, good.
Yes.
Edie, I want to give you a chance in case you have any questions before I ask any.
Sure. No, I was just saying my son is kind of at that earlier age. He is going to be 14 in November, so we just had our first IEP meeting where we actually started talking about the transition. So they kind of, he belongs to, he goes to Waukee School District. So we had kind of like an interview almost with it was a questionnaire that we answered as parents, and then there's also a separate page that we interviewed him with his likes and his interests. And then, so our whole IEP meeting was, they kind of took a lot of these points in there, and it was really good because we really wanted to hear from him as well as extrapolate some of the talents that we see that he does that he might not realize could be useful to an employer. So he's only in 7th grade, but we actually had a really good, like almost 3-hour IEP meeting last week, starting, this whole road. And I think because I also, volunteer as a co-president of a parent advocacy group statewide, that I'm using a lot of these skills as well as with other parents around the state and how they could get ready for transition. But I think this information is so good. So thank you.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad it's helpful.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say that I have my phone number and email address up, so please call me, or anytime you want to connect with me, that's fine. I would be glad to answer any questions. So.
I think it's like, as we get closer, you really, really want to narrow it down. What's, like my son, for example, his first choice is to, be a bus driver. And he's not budging on that. And we've talked to his doctors and his medical teams, and they've all said, realistically, he's not going to be able to have a license and drive a bus, So, we keep trying to, say, well, what about working as a dispatcher? Or we're trying to introduce other areas. We're bringing him to the bus company. And he hasn't really swayed from that. He's like, nah, those are boring. I really want to be the bus driver. We said, what about, they always need an aide. So, if he doesn't get, if he's not open to other discussions in a year, we might be calling. But even, I think that's a really good thing. What do you do for parents when their child is adamant and you don't want to burst their bubble, but, you're having all of their, medical team saying, not only he can probably not drive, but he should not drive. Based on his zero protective responses, and he doesn't understand what safety is. And, I mean, there's a whole myriad reasons of why he should not be driving for other people's safety as well as his own. But how do you kind of keep that interest in his fascination with that area, that theme, and that's what I probably need to work with other parents, too. Like, how can I maybe kind of gently go down another route, but keeping the theme.
Well, and I think, Evie, that's the idea, is that he's got a job title in his head, and he's stuck on a job title. And I think that, he's 14, and when I was 14, I think I was going to be a nurse. I had it in my head, So I think that, obviously he's young, and you've got a lot of time as he evolves into different jobs and experiences and careers. So I would suggest is making sure that he has different tasks that he does, and help him get different jobs, little small summer jobs or responsibilities, help him earn some income, doing some tasks for people in the neighborhood or community. And I would also start with the informational interviews of having him go out and visit with people and spend time doing a job shadow, helping him see other things. I think it's, you've got a great opportunity since he's just 14 to give him lots of other hands-on experiences that he's making an informed choice.
Excellent, yes. Yes, he does have time, and that's what we definitely need to do is kind of introduce him. And this past weekend, there's a huge kids festival at our local Waukee YMCA, and I signed him up. I volunteered him to work at the booth, and he was so excited. He told everybody he had a job. He was there, 15 minutes early, and he reported to the booth, and he was able to talk to people about coming to the Y and the different services. And I said, you don't bring your mom to work. So I'm going to be at the other end of the building, because this is a job. And so I let him work with the staff, and I went to the other end of the building where he couldn't visually see me because I wanted to see this is the first time that we were doing something like this. And I said, I'll come find you when your hour is up, your shift is up. And he was fine. I mean, I watched him, and he was still talking to, the public that was coming in. And so, he's a real ham. So we could just see him being, very sociable and very comfortable, and when you give him a job, he takes it very seriously. So it was kind of something new that we tried, because he has a very short umbilical cord some days, So it was something that we didn't give him too much time to think about it. We told him the night before that he had a job, so he didn't have too much time to worry about it. And he did it, and he did it really well. So try to write down these different things that we're trying, so when other parents call, I can give them ideas too.
That's wonderful, wonderful.
But I think this is such a great resource, and it really is good to interview different people, and just because it might, like you said, introduce them to different ideas.
Sure. Other questions or comments?
I just want to thank you, Patty, so much. I think that the information, just like Edie had said, is very, very helpful. And although we didn't have a large number of folks today, if you're comfortable, we're hoping that people might access the recorded link. And as we work with parents and families to kind of share the concept of self-directed discovery and some of the information that you've laid out for us, is a good starting point. And so I just want to tell you thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I think there'll be a lot of folks who are really interested in the information.
Thank you. And when we get our self-directed discovery workbook completed, I'll make sure you all get that as well.
That sounds great.
Thank
Thank you.
Wonderful.
And
well,
I want to
again,
add,
everybody. Oh, go ahead, Edie.
The PowerPoint, since I wasn't able to, open up the attachments, so will you email that to us separately so we can go back and review it? Because I was listening, so I wasn't able to keep up with taking notes, but I think when I go back and look at the PowerPoint, it'll jog my memory of what you said, Patty, and I'll be able to. So will that be available like as an attachment in email that you can send to us?
I will. I'll send out the recording and the webinar, and I'll probably capture some notes as well by listening to the recording again. Yeah, and I'll send that all out to the group.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This is a great hour and a half. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thanks, Patty. Thanks, Jess.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody. I'll leave the webinar open a little bit longer for the survey and to download documents, but thanks again, everybody, for joining today, and you're more than welcome to hang up and let go if you need to.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patty.